Alright, let's have a look at sideways parabolas. They are quite different in form to the parabolas that you are used to, but saying that the logic works very similarly. Okay, so when you see an equation that has a y squared but not an x squared, remember if it's got an x squared and a y squared, it must be a circle. If it's just got an x squared, it must be a normal parabola. But if it's got a y squared, then, and just a normal x, or an x to the power of 1, then you have what we call a sideways parabola. Okay? And our form for that is y minus a, or let's call it y minus d, all squared, is a x minus c. Okay? And our vertex, remember we had a turning point form for a normal parabola, which told us where our vertex was. In this form, our vertex will be at c and at d. Now be careful that you don't mix up the x and the y, alright? And both the y and the x go in the opposite directions to the sign. Okay, so my vertical shift here for my vertex would be -1, or +1 actually, and my horizontal shift will be -2. So my vertex will be at -2, +1. Be careful that you don't mix up your x and your y. Okay, now my a value is sitting over here, and we know that a is greater than 0, therefore it opens to the right. So it's going to look something like that. Alright. Now, as with any of our other graphs, we need to find an x and y intercept. Okay, so sideways parabola only has one x-intercept and can have up to 2 y-intercepts. So when y equals 0, we get -1 squared is 8x plus 2, and that gives us 1 is 8x plus 2. 1/8 is going to be x plus 2, and an 1/8 minus 2 will be 2 8 16 over 8, and that gives me -15 over 8. Okay, so I have an x-intercept at -15 on 8 and 0. My y-intercepts, I can't spell, intercepts occur when x equals 0. Okay, so now I have y take 1 squared is equal to 8 times 2. So y take 1 squared is 16. Remember, when we take a square root, we have plus or minus the square root. So plus or minus 4. So y is 1 plus or minus 4. So that means that my y-intercepts will be at 0, 5, and at 0, -3. Okay. Before we sketch it, or actually maybe let's sketch it and we'll talk about domain and range. I'm going to have an axis of symmetry that goes along my y equals d. Okay. So I'm going to plot where my vertex is. Let's just get this graph with some sort of a scale. Okay, so that's going to be at -1, -2, -3. And we're needing to go up and down. Oh, okay, got it. Okay, so we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so let's go back. Our vertex was at negative 2, 1. So negative 2, 1 is, remember we're always labeling our turning point of a parabola. And that's our axis of symmetry. Our x-intercept, we said, was at negative 15 on 8, which is close to negative 2. And our y-intercepts were at 5 and at 0, negative 3. Alright, and that gives us enough points to sketch our sideways. That's probably a little bit too pointy. Go into a nice rounded edge. There we go. Okay, so that's going to be y minus 1 all squared equals 8x plus 2. Again, the requirement is that you are labeling your vertex, your x and y intercepts, and your axis of symmetry. Okay, let's have a look at B. Here we have, there doesn't appear to be a vertical shift, and it looks like it might not be in the right form. Although, if I could get x naked, it might be. So let's just look. If we go y squared is negative 3x plus 6, y squared is negative 3x plus 2. Okay, now it's starting to look a little bit more like our sideways parabola. So in the form y minus d all squared equals a x minus c. Okay, that just means that my d is going to be 0. We have a vertex at C and D. Be careful you don't mix those up. And that means I have, that's going positive 2. It's going to be at negative 2 and 0. I've made a mistake. Careful, when you divide by negative 3, that should be negative 2. Okay, so our vertex is at 2, 0. Be careful when you're factorizing out a negative. Okay, now our a value in this case is less than 0, so that means it opens to the left hand side, which means it's going to look something like that. Again, as with any graph, we need our x and y intercepts. So x-intercept when y equals 0. And so we have 0 is negative 3x take 2. And so we have at x equals 2, we have an x-intercept. And our y-intercepts, when x equals 0, we have that y squared is going to be 6. So y will be plus or minus square root of 6. Okay, so then we have 0, negative root 6, and 0, positive root 6. Okay, let's sketch it, and then don't forget we need to look at our domain and range for both of these. Okay, so we have a vertex at 2 and 0. So there we have it at 2 and 0. And square root of 6 is somewhere between 2 and 3. Okay, so there we have 0 root 6, and there we have 0 and negative root 6, and our x-axis is our axis of symmetry at x equals 0. We had to also remember to write here y equals 0. Y equals 1 for that axis of symmetry. Alright, we now have our points to be able to sketch this sideways parabola. Oops. And this one was y squared is 6 minus 3x. Okay, let's talk about this one's domain and range first. So my domain, if you will notice, has got no values to the right of x equals 2. Okay, so that means my domain must go from negative infinity to 2, inclusive of 2, exclusive of negative infinity. My range, if I have a look, this function will carry on forever and ever and ever in both the positive and negative values. So that's just going to be all your real numbers. Okay. For this one, my domain has got no values to the left of negative 2. Okay, so that's the starting point of my domain, and I'm including it, so negative 2, and that goes to positive infinity, excluding, and my range again will be all the real numbers.